You're listening to 17 Carat K-Pop, the podcast that's a little bit of everything with a K-pop twist. From pop culture critiques to the history of K-pop to interviews with people in the K-pop industry and K-pop artists themselves, to concert and album reviews, to a deep dive into the discographies of different K-pop artists, to K-pop news updates, to stories about the music industry more broadly. This show tries to cover everything about K-pop and K-pop as it applies to the larger music and concert scenes. Visit 17caratkpop.weebly.com for more information about the show. That's 17caratkpop.weebly.com. Hello everybody, welcome back to 17 Carat K-Pop. Today on the show, my special guest is Tushar Apte, a producer and songwriter who's worked on Love to Hate Me by Blackpink, Home by BTS, some C-pop as well. He's worked on songs for Luhan, Western pop artists too, Zayn, Demi Lovato, Nicki Minaj. I could go on and on. Thank you for being here, Tushar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I get into more specific questions, would you mind sharing a bit about your journey, your story of how you entered the world of songwriting and producing, and then specifically how you ended up writing and working on K-pop songs?
Basically, I've been playing music most of my life, and I sort of started writing songs, around high school, but a lot of these were fairly basic rudimentary things, just me playing at my piano and recording them on, at that time, I might be dating myself a little bit, but I recorded these on my dad had a mini disc player, which was it was around the time of early MP3 players, and you had these little discs, you could put in there and record. So I would record some of my songs that way, but I never really started making, really getting into the beat making and the production process until I was in college. And, it was still sort of a hobby for me because I haven't grown up in a show business family, so I never had any real professional exposure to the music industry. So but I think deep down I always knew that I wanted to work in music. And honestly, at one point, I was basically working a full-time job. I worked at a really big IT company, and I was also playing gigs at night, all around Sydney in Australia, where I grew up. And I would, play gigs, do music stuff around the side of my job, and then work my job. And at a certain point, I just had enough of it, and I decided, if I don't leave and really, really give music my full focus, then I'll probably regret it for the rest of my life. And I was 20 at that time, and I had an opportunity to get a visa. I took that, and I left everything. I dropped my whole life, and I moved out to LA. I spent through all of my savings within a month because I didn't realize how expensive it was here. And
yeah.
I did the classic sort of Hollywood shuffle, as they call it. I slept on couches and, hustled around. And I actually auditioned. A lot of my first gigs were as a musician. So I was auditioning for different sort of hired gun bands, different touring bands, and worked random gigs. And, it's one of those funny things where through that process, you sort of find what your strengths are. And then the music world, or just the network in LA sort of forces you to survive by using your strengths. And for me, that was always the song world, arrangement, production, songwriting. So my first really significant record that I had was actually through a friend of mine in London, who he wasn't able to make this session one day, or he was I can't remember exactly what happened, but he wasn't able to basically finish the production on this song that he had with Adam Levine from Maroon 5 and PJ Morton. And basically he gave me the song, and he was like, can you do some production on this? And I did it. And, that ended up being my first release. And I took full advantage of that. And I sort of used that to open some other doors for me. One of which was a friend of mine back in Australia who knew somebody else who was a K-pop producer. And, this is my friend Alex, and he was living in Korea at the time, from Australia, but I think he'd been living in Korea for almost 10 years at that time. And he was really my gateway into the not just the Korean pop stuff, but the Asian pop world in general. And he really helped me understand and develop that side of the craft for me, like really understand the sound, the melodically how the songs are written, and just that whole world. So we worked on a whole bunch of early development K-pop stuff. Some of it didn't really come out. There was one, the first song that we had out together was a song called by My Teen, the band My Teen.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a demo that I did at my parents' place on like I remember I produced it in this very very old software that I had, and I borrowed a like a kid's learning guitar. So the guitar that you hear on that song is actually me sort of playing this really kiddie guitar that I had to rush to get from my friend's place to like to make it in time to submit that demo. And then, yeah, we've been building since then, but he was really my first mentor, I guess, in the K-pop and Asian pop space. And then when I moved to LA and started really, really writing, because I knew that style, and it was a way to sort of keep working while I was doing American stuff, because I found that I was actually getting a lot more paid production work doing Asian pop stuff, C-pop stuff, K-pop stuff, some Japanese stuff. So, I've just always kept it going, whether it's on the side or whether during certain parts of my year, I sort of go into a place where I really focus a lot on K-pop.
You were actually originally at college for something totally unrelated to studying music, right?
Yeah, I was in college. I did a psychology degree and I also had an English major. And then I did a master's degree in journalism while I was working. So it was just, the thing was at that time, I was really, like I said, I had no idea how to make it in music professionally. And I think, my circles, the society there, I think sort of forces you to take the straight and narrow sort of path, even if it doesn't fit you. So I think that I was just, at that time, I really was just trying to be what I just was not.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of overlap between like C-pop and J-pop and K-pop writing circles. Is that the case? Like it's a lot of people who dabble in kind of all of it as opposed to like separate
Right.
types of songwriters or something?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, J-pop is quite a different thing. There's definitely the people who are very successful in the J-pop world. They tend to not do K-pop or C-pop. J-pop's sort of very much its own thing, and as a listener, I'm sure you can understand like
Mm-hmm.
it's quite different. Whereas I think
Yeah.
there's much more overlap in terms of with C-pop and K-pop, just because especially nowadays more than ever, they draw so much on the American style sonically, even though they adapt it to to what's going on there. So I think there's definitely a lot of overlap between the C and the K-pop thing, but J-pop tends to have its own, that's its whole own sort of world and different sort of people you got to know and things like that.
What is kind of your process like? Not just for any song, but like specifically for K-pop, are there certain steps that go into you working on those songs or
It honestly, really very. I've had songs that I've written for completely non Asian acts that have been placed there just because they were, you know, so just to take it back one step. So from a day to day sort of perspective, what I do is, I'm in the room with other songwriters here in LA. We write a song. If we're not in the room with the artist, that tends to be a demo. Sometimes those demos, if they don't, you're basically shopping those around, and sometimes those demos just by happy accident they just land with a K-pop thing just because they're looking for that specific thing. There are other instances where I'm in touch with the record labels and they say, hey, we're looking for songs for such and such group. They want songs that are sort of like this, and then I'll go in and actually try to mold something around whatever references they want it to sound or to feel like,
hmm
and there's other stuff like with some of the stuff I'd done with BTS, it was always about, okay, here's sort of, they had a lot of the music, and then it was about, okay, writing songs on the music, and that was the collaborative process with them. So yeah, it varies.
With the BTS song Home, how did that come about? Was that more of a one of those cases where they already sent you like some music to write for or something like that?
Yeah, basically, it was funny. It was December 2018, and basically, I had been honestly out of the loop of the K-pop world for a little while. I hadn't really been paying a lot of attention about who was coming up and what the different acts were. I was really at that time focused on the American side of things. And Big Hit reached out to me because I think that they'd heard a record I'd done with Chris Brown called Zero, and I think they'd liked a couple other things that I'd done. So they reached out to me and they said, we have this where there's a label and we have this group BTS and we're looking for songs for them. Would you be interested in writing with us? So I had no idea who they were, but it was winter here in LA. There was no sessions going on. There was absolutely nothing going on. It was totally quiet time. But I looked through, the stuff that they sent, and it was pretty obvious that BTS were absolutely massive, even though, I'd been clearly hiding under a rock up until that point. And so they sent me some of the musical, they were sort of rough musical guides at that point. And it was in January, and I remember it was like freezing cold here in LA, and I had a studio that was above this barber shop here in West Hollywood, and at night, and it was one of these nights, and I just couldn't get to sleep for some reason. I just couldn't get to sleep, and I was like, oh, let me just go to the studio and try to work on something. So I went to the studio, put up the computer, and I pulled up the Big Hit email and the thing, and I wrote actually to 3 tracks that one night. Oh, sorry, two of them that night. And yeah, one of the, my bunch of my parts ended up on Home basically later on. So it was just sometimes these songs are like that, a whole bunch of things have to line up. I happened to be free. I didn't really feel the pressure of doing the work. I couldn't sleep, so that's why I went in that night to work on the song, and it just came out, and they sound so good on it, and it's been a really big honor and a really cool experience to be a part of that record.
Sounds like it just all sort of happened naturally.
Yeah, very much so. It's very much just a natural thing. It was fairly instinctual, when I heard the stuff that they sent over, I sort of knew melodically what I would have done on it. I didn't listen to too much of their music before I went in and did it. But at the same time, I think at that point I'd been, in and out working on K-pop for almost 5-6 years at that time. So I was fairly familiar with, the genre and the melodic math of, K-pop.
It was December 2018. I believe that song came out like not till June of 2019 or something like that. Is that common, like for like you work on a song and it doesn't even come out for
Oh
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know.
That's very common. And I would say for the most part in Korea, songs tend to come out a little quicker. In the States, it takes a long, long time. I've
Hmm.
had some very short release times, but also, I did a Zayn and Nicki Minaj song that basically took 2.5 years almost to come out.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, 6 months is a pretty standard time, and a lot of that has to do with just from a practical point of view. The label, it has to think about so many different components to how to make a record successful. They have to give it some lead time to give the platforms enough time to get on playlists. They have to plan for videos and performances and promo. So, from that, if you think about it from that point of view, a 6 month lead time is not that long.
What's the story behind Love to Hate Me by Blackpink?
That one's a little bit different because that was a song that we wrote entirely here in LA, at least the initial draft of it, minus the rap section. But we were at a writing camp for the group Little Mix, the UK pop group Little Mix, and
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
just couldn't get to anything specific for them. So, but we were it was myself, Rob Grimaldi, Steph Jones, and Chloe. We wrote that song in a session. It was similar to the BTS experience in the sense of like it was a really instinctual experience. It was like sometimes you write songs and you have to really labor over them, and you have to like fix things, and you're sort of working through the day to like find different melodies and find different ways of doing things before it's all correct. And then sometimes the song just sort of comes together in a couple of hours, and it's the magic is just there in the room. And that was honestly one of those days where we pretty much had the song in a couple of hours, and then we really took our time to record the demo correctly. Especially with K-pop stuff, vocal production is so important. So we tend to, or at least when I work on K-pop stuff, really make sure that all the vocal parts are right. And vocally you can get very intricate with how you do vocal production in K-pop. So we took our time with that. But yeah, it was a very easy and a super fun day. We sent that song off to Blackpink's label, and they really liked it. They held it for a little while. I think they were getting songs from some really heavy heavy hitters over here in LA, and obviously they're such a huge group, so they're going to get the best songs that are in the song sphere at that time. And so I think we only really found out, I think we wrote that in December 2019, somewhere around there. So yeah, early December 2019, and I think it was confirmed for the record around maybe May, June. It passed through the sort of magic touch of Teddy and Danny. They were definitely involved as soon as it got into, okay, this is definitely going to be on the record. And by that time we were well into the sort of quarantine section of the year, so they did a lot of that.
When you work on K-pop songs and you're done with them and send them over, does it ever happen where they record their vocals for it and then send it back and you have to like change the song or rewrite stuff or edit it, or are you done with it for like period once it's sent out to them?
Normally by the time the artist records it, in my experience, most of the time it's done. Sometimes what will happen is you'll send the song to a label, and they'll ask for revisions before the performer records the song. And so yeah, so normally it's that, by the time the artist records the song, normally that is sort of the finish.
Do you ever work on a song and then it comes out and like then you find out it came out, or do you always get like a heads up?
That's a tricky one. It has happened to me a couple of times. Most of the time, because I'm also the producer on the song, meaning I'm also involved in the track side of the song. We as producers, we're normally involved till the end, or at least we're the ones that I don't know if this is of any interest to your listeners, but as producers, we're the ones that see a lot of the paperwork, to the contracts and stuff once these songs are confirmed. So we're not just blindsided by anything like that. But sometimes as songwriters, yeah, it definitely has happened where a song is just out, and I didn't even know for months and months that.
Is there some sort of like intuition you get when you work on some songs that when you work on certain songs like that one's going to be a big hit? Kind of get a premonition for any of that?
As far as it being a big hit, I don't know about that. I think anybody who claims that they know that this is going to be a big hit, in terms of the commercial success of a song, they're probably lying. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
You certainly get that. You certainly have a feeling when something is special, when it's different. You're not thinking to yourself, oh, this is going to do, 50 million streams or whatever. It's not really that kind of feeling, but you definitely feel like, oh, this is better than the other stuff. Something about this feels like it's really special, and it'll really work. And we really definitely had that feeling working on Love to Hate Me. I think by the end of the day, we were really like, oh, I really think this is something. Not obviously at that time we didn't know that Blackpink was going to take it or anything like that. We just knew that, yeah, this song feels like something. So much of what we do, even as relatively successful as people in this world, where we're still at the, for people like me, most of our professional lives, we're still getting hugely disappointed. We get more rejections than we get actual successes. So when you feel that sort of special energy around a song, you try not to overthink it, by thinking, oh, this is really going to be something, you sort of you need to,
right, just be
yeah,
grateful
you need
for
to be
it.
great, and you need to set yourself up for the disappointment if it doesn't, like we were talking about before, sometimes it can take 2 years for these songs to come out. So you have to just kind of have faith that the song is good.
I'm really curious more about your experiences in C-pop as well, because I feel like that just has not gotten the global
Definitely.
attention that K-pop has, and it deserves a lot more
Yeah.
attention, I personally think. I guess I'm just wondering, like, if you have any stories about working on specific C-pop songs, or just in that world, like any
Right.
experiences, or
No,
yeah, I don't know,
no,
anything
I
about
got you.
C-pop.
I love C-pop because sort of, as someone, for me, I really grew up on very, very melodic pop, especially just that was just the music my parents used to play in the house. It was, Stevie Wonder and Billy Joel and, Michael Jackson and Prince and ABBA. This is like very, very, so one of the things I love about K-pop and also C-pop is it allows you to do those sort of, it's not that it's like old school melodies, but it allows you to be very, very melodic when you're writing, which is so different from, the American style, which is much more sort of vibey, and the emphasis is more on the rhythmic elements of it. And so I've always loved working in the Asian pop space because of that, because I think Asian audiences in particular, they really, really love melodies and they love ballads, which so that allows me to sort of do that kind of stuff. And I guess one thing I will say about C-pop is it's definitely, they're still a little bit behind, obviously, in terms of the impact that K-pop has from a global point of view. But I think they're definitely closing the gap in terms of like the quality, the performance aspect, and obviously how huge some of these acts are. Like Luhan or like JJ Lin is one of my friends works in who works in Asia, and we've written a couple of songs together, and we've written one song together that is one of my favorite Asian pop songs I've ever been involved with, and I really, really, fingers crossed, hope it comes out this year. I went down to Shanghai in 2018 with my friend Brian Lee, who you might have heard of. He's written a couple of songs for Blackpink, but he wrote on Lovesick Girls, and then he's sort of written big American hits, Havana and Let Me Love You by Justin Bieber, so many songs. And so he was sort of one of my early songwriting mentors, and we went down to Shanghai to work with Gia, who was part of the group Miss A. She might be half Korean, but she's basically a Chinese native, and so we went down there to work on her solo project. And we did 2 songs for her. One is called Drip. If you get a chance to check it out, it was so much fun. We just had a blast. I love Shanghai, and I'm super excited to go back down there to do more, more of that work. And I think going back to the sort of the appreciation they have for music, I think they really, really love the craft, and it's only gonna get bigger and better.
Was it also on that trip that you worked on the song with Luhan, or was that a
That
different?
was one of my early days of working in the K-pop sort of C-pop world. Is I was working with another producer, AD, over here, who he'd done a lot of work for YG and a couple of other labels, but he's a Korean American guy that lives over in LA, in Koreatown, and we got connected through one of my other friends in Korea. We used to write together a lot when I sort of first moved to LA, and we wrote role play at his apartment in Korea, and we sent it around to a few people. His manager, to think his manager was also A&Ring the Luhan project, and so that's how he sort of got it to him. Yeah, that was a different thing, but that was, for me personally, that was similar to my experience with BTS. Is I had really no idea just how big Luhan was, and and suddenly when that record came out, I was getting emails from all my friends in Korea and China saying, "Oh, I can't believe like you worked on this song," and it's like, that's when I realized, oh, this is really a thing that's moving.
When you are stuck for inspiration, where do you tend to get that from?
I'm kind of right now in a funny period of where I'm trying to find that inspiration again for a little bit. I guess we've just come out of the New Year's holidays, and I'm still trying to sort of work my way into a good creative place for the year. But I think it's an interesting balance between the discipline and then just taking time out for yourself and trying to like live life and sort of letting it come to you. I think a lot of people have this very sort of flighty idea that as professional creators, we just sort of walk around the garden, and we sort of walk around the street waiting for inspiration to suddenly strike us. But that's not really how it works in my experience. From a professional point of view, I think you have to just try to do something every day. Even if you're not really feeling it or the ideas aren't great, you just have to try to create and do something. So there's something to be said about like just working, every day, just doing something, even if it's not good. You have to kind of work through the bad ideas to get to the good ones, in a sense. When you know that you're just doing it just for the sake of doing it, it's definitely important to just get out there in the world and go like hang out with your friends, like, just take a little walk around, go to the beach, just put your feet in the sand, just like find other ways to engage with the world outside, and suddenly you can come back in and feel energized and feel excited about music, and something will just hit you. Sometimes I've had full songs come to me in my sleep. But you have to sort of work with the things you can control, which I think is, you just have to have a sense of discipline and a really good work ethic around what you do, even if it's not really great.
It's an extra interesting time now to be a songwriter, because it seems like a lot of those chances to go out and live and get new inspiration for songs are like not
Yeah,
possible
it's
right
harder.
now. So, what is the actual songwriting like these days? Because it sounds like you're usually with quite a few other people working on
Yeah,
a song, but
3 or 4 people is pretty standard for me. I try to not get to more people than that when we're actually writing in a room. Like you said, this year is so different. We're doing a lot more. We're doing a lot more writing over Zoom. So we just get on Zoom calls and try to throw ideas back and forth. I think with the thankfully we have the internet and these sort of tools where we can share our ideas fairly quickly. We just sort of send audio files back and forth and try to stitch songs together that way. It's not the same vibe as being in studio. Maybe I'm a traditionalist that way, but yeah, it's just something we have to adapt to, isn't it? Like so many other things this year. But fingers crossed we'll sort of get back to the old way of working. I think, like you said, you touched on something. The fact that everything is kind of sort of restricted and closed down, that's the bit that I think makes it a little bit harder. Is not only are we having to do these sessions over Zoom, but we can't even really go out and just like, we're all just sort of hopeful that this is just a temporary sort of phase.
it feels like K-pop, the music industry never really
No.
slowed down there, but it feels like for the Western artists that a lot of them are putting albums on hold until they can tour and things like that. Like, is that affecting what assignments you have?
Honestly, it hasn't really. The funny thing is, last year was probably one of my best years I've ever had. I had 16 releases last year between the K-pop stuff and a bunch of
Wow.
American stuff. And I did music for a TV show on NBC. Because the content business was really booming last year, and everybody was at home, so it was like Spotify. People were still listening to music and watching TV shows. So from that point of view, stuff still needed to be created. But like you said, there was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a lot of artists that were holding on to songs, and waiting for when they're probably waiting for when they can do the promo in the old way, where go do late night shows, do live performances, all that kind of stuff. In terms of how it's affected the types of songs we are writing, I don't think it really has. I think if anything, what the trends in music tend to be you sort of have to write against the dominant sort of feeling of the moment. So normally in times where people are feeling down, that's when upbeat music tends to do really well. When things are going really good, that's like normally the period when there's a lot of really, really great emo rock, if you think about America in the 90s or something like that. And then, so,
Mm-hmm.
I would say this year, the only thing that I feel like has changed is that we're still writing upbeat pop songs. And I think that more danceable records is going to be the thing for this year.
Do you have other predictions regarding like songs and trends for this year, or is it mostly you're thinking it's going to be a lot more just upbeat
Yeah, I
stuff?
think it's interesting. We know in music that music tends to go in sort of a 20-year cycle. So, for example, a lot of the music we hear nowadays is starting to reference 90s music, which is sort of around that 20 to 25-year mark old. Because the people like me who have grown up on late 90s, say early 2000s music, we suddenly grow up, we suddenly get old, and we become the people who are writing the songs. So we're going to bring those influences with us. So I think sort of early 2000s R&B pop, which was sort of the big thing back then, come back. Like we talked about, to me, always sort of energetic and up. And not that that's any different from any other era, because pop music, especially the stuff that works on the charts, tends to be more up tempo anyway, whether it's in Korea or China or here. I think China's sometimes the exception, because they definitely gravitate towards the ballad and the sort of mid-tempo stuff a lot more.
Is there anything, any assignments or any songs you're working on now that are coming out this year?
I got into so much trouble on Twitter around the time of the Blackpink release for talking about something like that. So I don't have anything confirmed from the K-pop side, but I'm definitely working towards a couple of really interesting things on that side. So one thing I really have always wanted to do is to like be part of release for like a Super Junior or Big Bang.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, especially when live
Yes.
music comes back. That Big Bang is perfect
Oh, they're
for
the
a
best.
live
Yeah, they're
song.
they're definitely one of my biggest influences, and sort of really look up to all the musically all the stuff that G Dragon and those guys were doing.
Yeah, he's awesome. Do you hope to keep dabbling in like C-pop and J-pop, or yeah, maybe J-pop, K-pop? Like, do you like not getting tied down and feeling like you're working just on Western pop or just on K-pop?
Yeah, I think I've always been that type of person, because I get quite bored being stuck in one place for too long, which is why I also do film scoring. I obviously I write songs, but I also do a lot of the film and TV work. And there's definitely, from a strategic point of view, I've always wanted to keep the Asian pop side going, because it's just a thing that's going to get bigger and bigger. And that's the way that the world is changing as well. We're becoming more, a lot of from a global economy point of view, it's being focused around that Asian market already. And I think that's how I saw it when I entered
Mm-hmm.
K-pop 8 years ago. And that's still how I see it. So I definitely, a lot of the stuff around, when we did the Blackpink record, was one of, on the American side, I was sort of, had done a lot more of the K-pop stuff than some of the other writers, and I was lucky that I was able to take advantage of being one of the fairly early, American writers involved in that side of things. So it's not really something I can just let go like that. So I definitely see myself continuing to do it. And one of the exciting things about K-pop, I think, right now is that it's so huge globally. It definitely wasn't this big when I had started doing it. Also, the challenges are different. That I think in terms of the quality of the writing and the production, it's just so good. It's just such a great way to sort of keep the sword sharp, as they say. From a creative point of view. So yeah, I definitely see myself getting, if anything, more involved in that side of things.
Just two more questions. One is just broadly speaking, what is your advice for I mean, mostly what's your advice, I guess, for someone trying to work in the world of songwriting and producing, but also just in general. You took like a big leap of faith to just like totally change the direction of your life
Yeah.
to work in LA. I guess your advice for a big career pivot or just some big career moment.
I think you touched on something there as you were asking it, which was taking those kind of risks doesn't just apply to being a songwriter, but it can apply to anything that you're sort of really, really passionate about that you're trying to do in your life. And it's funny being on the, I guess you could say I'm on the other side of this where I'd done a lot of that stuff. And when I look back on that leap, I guess it seems easier when I look back than it did when I was doing it. You know what I'm saying? So I guess the advice would be to just, there's so many people that have ideas, but the winners always execute. And it's honestly just about doing stuff. And you really do have to think about what's the worst thing that can happen. And a lot of times when you think of it that way, you'll realize that it's not going to be that bad, no failure once you try, because a lot of times just giving something that shot will actually lead to its own opportunities, whether it's the thing that you were looking for or it's something else that in that journey, and I've seen it happen from so many times, not just in a music sense, but in other sort of professional avenues, as journalists, as podcasters, as people in the media, and all kinds of other things. So you can't rationalize these things, because once you start, if you do think about it from like a very practical perspective, which is so common in our world, and certainly my parents, obviously, I'm from Asia, my parents are Indian, from that background, so how they are, it's like it's fairly practical focused. You can't really think about it like that, because otherwise it seems crazy. It seems like the craziest thing to do, to drop like the nice life and just to leave it and just to move to LA and just be broke for a little while. It seems crazy, but you can't think of it from that perspective. You have to trust that instinct.
That's a great message to end with. Last quick question then is just where can my listeners stay up to date
on Instagram? I'm at Springloaded. I'm on TikTok at the moment, but I'm still sort of figuring out how to use it. But definitely get me on Instagram. Any songwriters, anybody who wants to message me about anything, send me songs, whatever. I'm always listening to stuff. I'm always taking different submissions from people. I'm always listening to new music and always looking to find new talent out there, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this.
Of course. Thank you for having me, and I hope I didn't sort of ramble on there too two of us there.
No, on podcasts, long answers are always the best.
That's great.
So, well, thanks so much.
You too. Speak soon.
Have a good
Bye.
one.